Welcome to FM African Documentary. My name is Felix Mwenda. The Wagalla Massacre, the greatest massacre to has ever happened in the Kenyan soil. But before I start explaining to you in regards to the Wagalla Massacre, I want to give you a brief history of the massacres that has ever happened in our country. The Sotik massacre was the first massacre to have ever gone down in the history of Kenya. It happened in 1905 in Sotik, Bomet County, Rift Valley. The Kipsigis from the Talai clan were murdered in an act of collective punishment by a colonial force dispatched from the British administration in Kenya. A punitive expedition under the command of Mayor Pope NC having been sanctioned and dispatched in response to the Sigis community refusing to surrender Maasai women, children, and hens of cattle stolen in raids on the Maasai Reserve in modern-day Narok County. In 2018, Kericho County, through Governor Paul Chepkoini, successfully launched a complaint with the UN Special Rapporteur in Geneva, asking the British government to compensate for the massacre and subsequent displacement of the Kipsigis during the colonial era. From the Sotik massacre, we have the Kitale massacre of 1929, of May 12, 1929. The Rook family massacre of 1953, January. The Larry massacre of March 26, 1953. The Chuka massacre of June 1953. And the Hola massacre of March 3, 1959. The Isiolo massacre of 1960s, Kisumu massacre of 1969, and the Garissa massacre of 1980. But now, the last massacre that happened in Kenya, leaving out the massacre that took place in Mombasa in the year 2002, let's get to speaking about the Wagalla Massacre itself in great details, because this is a massacre that took life of over 10,000 people. The Wagalla Massacre was a massacre of ethnic Somalis by the Kenyan Army of 10th February 1984 in Wajir County in Kenya. The then President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi opened barracks near Wagalla, where he brought soldiers to discipline the villagers irrespective of age. This video provides insufficient context to those unfamiliar with the subject. The massacre took place on 10th February 1984 at the Wagalla Airstrip against the Degoodi clan. It was facilitated by other Somali clans who spied and helped Kenyan troops. The facility is situated approximately 15 to 9 kilometers west of the Wajir County capital in the former northeastern province, a region primarily inhabited by the Somalis. Kenyan troops had descended on the area to reportedly help diffuse the clan-related conflict. However, according to eyewitnesses' testimony, about 10,000 Somali men of Were they were taken to an airstrip and prevented from accessing water and food for 5 days before being executed by the Kenyan soldiers. In 1984, former dictator President Siad Barre of Somali responded to the Kenyan president. The Somali people in Kenya who were being mercilessly persecuted. It is something I cannot watch idly The persecution inflicted upon them clearly reveals that Kenya does not regard them as part of the Kenyan society. If they did, they would not have treated them this inhumanly. The obligation of Somalism forces us not to watch handily if we're the Somali government, and we will take a clear action. I say this to the Kenyan government. I have instructed Somali's military to be put on high alert and be ready for any subsequent orders. If the Kenyan government does not stop this campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Somali people in Kenya, be assured that their silent cry will not fall on deaf ears, for military action will be taken. According to a commissioner with the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission of Kenya, a government oversight body that had been formed in response to the 2008 Kenyan post-election violence, the Wagalla Massacre represents the worst human rights violation in Kenya's history. The exact number of people killed in the massacre is unknown. However, eyewitnesses place the figure at around 10,000 to 15,000 deaths. For years, the Kenyan government denied that a massacre had taken place and insisted that only 57 people were killed in a security operation to disarm their area's residents. It was not until October 2000 that the government publicly acknowledged wrongdoing on the part of its security forces. In 2010, Bethuel Kiplagat stepped aside as chairman of the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission because of his alleged involvement in authorizing the action that led to the massacre. Reports of the number of men from the Somali Degoodi clan in particular that were detained by security forces and brought to the airstrip range from 381 to upward to 10,000. In April 2012, Kiplagat was reinstated as TJRC chairman after the Justice Minister Eugene Wambalwa brokered a truce between him and the other commissioners. The same year, the former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga ordered an official probe into the atrocities and indicated that the National Attorney General should bring to justice those responsible for the killings. Odinga also ordered a museum to be constructed in honor of the victims, in memory and honor of those who lost their lives in this massacre. Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, KNCHR, in conjunction with local and international partners, has supported the construction of a monument in Wajir Town. The monument, which is said to be unveiled on 14 February, was said to be unveiled on 14 February 2014. As the names of only 482 victims engraved on the marble and pasted on a wall. These names were taken from the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission report and subjected to a thorough validation exercise to purposes of ensuring that they were indeed names of the people who lost their lives as a result of the massacre. In February 2015, the Wajir County Governor Ahmed Abdullahi said his government would partner with local and international human rights organizations in seeking justice for the victims of the massacre, saying that the Truth Commission report offered such an opportunity which remained squandered. Those mentioned by the TJRC report and witnesses must be prosecuted. The people who afflicted the pain to our people remain unpunished and are still with us, Abdullahi said. In conjunction and in reference to the Wagalla Massacre, the film documentary Scared, The Anatomy of a Massacre, directed by Judy Kibinge, founder of the East African Documentary Film Fund, is the first independent visual attempt to chronicle the history of the massacres experienced by both the victims and survivors, some of whom were government officials. The documentary was launched at the National Museum of Kenya in Nairobi in February 2015, and until to date, cases have been launched against the Kenyan government to compensate for the lives of those that were lost in the Wagalla Massacre. On January 11, 1985, the Principal State Counsel Mohije Hole Kehiwa wrote on behalf of the Attorney General to Ibrahim Hamis Hadan and Halnur Yusuf Mohammed Hussein through their lawyers Munika and company advocates, asking them by the rules of civil procedure to supply specific information about the death of their fathers. The information requested included the dates and times when the deceased two persons were killed, whether they were killed by the Kenyan Army personnel, the Kenyan Police, or 1982 Air Force personnel, and the names of the specific officers responsible for the deaths of the deceased. The Wagalla Massacre, regarded as the Wagalla Massacre. Dark times they were. 1984, 10th of February. Still to date, it shall remain in the history of the Kenyan people. The question of just what happened at the Wagalla Airstrip between 10th and 14th February 1984 was partially answered by the late Justice Ole Tipis in a ministerial statement about the military operation, read on the floor of Parliament on the night of 10th April 1984 and reported in the Nation of 13th April 1984. Ole Tipis revealed that the security situation in Wagalla was politically motivated and the leaders were involved in divisive strategies that were planned based on ethnic considerations. He claimed that the government decided to carry out its operation against the Degoodi community to provide security to a neighboring clan. Ole Tipis gave an accurate account of the process, but avoided mentioning the resulting genocide. The Wajir District Commissioner and the Provincial Securities Committee were convened by an order from the National Security Council. The meeting took place on February 8, 1984 at the Wajir District Commissioner's office. The district commissioner himself was conveniently replaced by a district officer, MMTM, according to the signatures in the visitor's book at the DC's office at the time and eyewitnesses' reports. This meeting was attended by J.S. Madenge, Permanent Secretary Office of the President, B.A. Kiplagat of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, David Mwirari, a Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs, John Gituma, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Brigadier General Kibwana of the Department of Defense, B.N. Masharia of the Treasury, Z.J.M. Kamencho of Deputy Secretary in the Office of the President, J.P. Gitui, DCEO, Police Headquarters, J.K. Kagudi, and J.P. Mwagovia of the Office of the President, C.M. Maswani, Provincial Police Officer, North-Eastern Province, Mohindi of the 7 Kenya Rifles, J.K. Kenyanjui, Director of Land Adjudication, Nairobi, and finally Benson N. Kearia, Provincial Commissioner, North-Eastern Province. The meeting resolved to carry out an operation to disarm the Degoodi force and then to provide the names of the bandits who were committing crimes in the district. According to the statement by Ole Tipis, once the operation was authorized, it began in earnest on 10th February for 0400 hours and involved the police, the administration police, and the army. The operation covered Elben Dambas, Betelehu, Heldas, Grifitu, and Bula Jogo. According to the government statement, most of these areas had been swept by 11th February. When the army surrounded Bula Jogo, they ordered the residents to vacate their homes according to Ole Tipis. The residents refused to comply with the order. Then the military then forcibly removed 381 male members of the Degoodi clan from their homes and took them to the Wagalla Airstrip 9 miles west of Wajir town. Ole Tipis admitted that those held were interrogated for 3 days and the shaft were rafted when the district commissioner accompanied by the OCPD entered the airstrip. Some of the crowd started to escape while others shouted at government officers in confusion. Gunshots took over, but truth remains that over 10,000 people were murdered in the Wagalla Massacre. Today marks, as of today being on 17th of February 2023, it marks 39 years since the Wagalla Massacre, and the victims have refused to stay quiet until the government takes concrete steps to provide redress. It will be hard for the victims and their families to move on until now. That's what I have in regards to the Wagalla Massacre. My name is Felix Mwenda, and this